The day started like any other. I had just returned home from a grueling day at work, the kind that leaves your shoulders aching and your mind numb. As I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, a sense of normalcy enveloped me. But little did I know that this ordinary evening was about to unravel the very fabric of my life. Emma was in the kitchen, her back turned to me as she busily prepared dinner. The aroma of sautéed onions and garlic filled the air, a comforting reminder of the many evenings we had spent together. I greeted her with a tired smile and a brief kiss on the cheek, trying to push aside the day's stresses. As I made my way to the living room, I noticed Emma's phone lying face up on the coffee table. It was unusual for her to leave it unattended, especially when we had been so careful about privacy. The screen lit up with a notification, but I dismissed it as a routine message. However, something compelled me to glance at the phone, a nagging feeling I couldn't shake off. I picked up the phone, and as I turned it over in my hands, the screen came alive with an open messaging app. The messages were from someone named Alex, a name I hadn't heard before. My heart began to race, and I felt a cold sweat forming on the back of my neck. I hesitated for a moment, then began to read through the conversations that had been left open. The messages were a damning revelation. They were intimate, affectionate, and filled with a level of familiarity that suggested a deep and ongoing relationship. I saw exchanges of "I miss you" and "can't wait to see you tonight," accompanied by heart emojis and promises of secret rendezvous. Each message was like a dagger, slicing through the veneer of the life I thought I knew. As I scrolled further, I came across photos, images of Emma and Alex together, laughing and holding each other in undeniably intimate ways. There was one photo in particular that struck me deeply: Emma and Alex, arm in arm, their faces beaming with joy. They were in a cozy cafe, sharing a private moment that seemed far too personal for just a casual acquaintance. My hands trembled as I put the phone back on the table. The weight of the betrayal was almost too much to bear. I stared at the screen, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what I had just uncovered. Emma's smile, which had once been a source of comfort and love, now seemed like a mask hiding a cruel deception. As I stood there in the dim light of the living room, a rush of emotions surged through me: shock, anger, and a profound sense of betrayal. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments of our life together, trying to understand how this had happened, how Emma had managed to hide such a significant part of her life from me. I needed answers, but I also knew that I had to be careful. Confronting Emma in a fit of rage wouldn't be productive. Instead, I decided to wait, to observe and gather more information before making any moves. For now, I felt a cold resolve setting in, a determination to uncover the full truth and understand the extent of the deception that had been woven into our lives. As the evening wore on, I watched Emma with a new perspective, her every gesture now tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. I knew that nothing would ever be the same again, that the trust we had built over the years was shattered beyond repair. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind full of plans, I prepared myself for the confrontation that lay ahead. The kitchen, once a sanctuary of warmth and domesticity, now felt suffocatingly small. Emma's back was still turned towards me as she stirred the simmering pot on the stove, the soft sizzle of cooking food punctuating the otherwise tense silence. The sight of her, so seemingly untroubled, only intensified the storm raging within me. I cleared my throat, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. "Emma, we need to talk." Her shoulders tensed slightly, but she didn't turn around. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone light and unassuming. She was trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but I could sense an edge in her voice, a slight falter that betrayed her unease. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. I didn't want to give away the depth of my knowledge just yet. "I've been meaning to ask you about something I saw on your phone." At the mention of her phone, Emma's hand froze mid-stir, and she turned around slowly. Her face was a mask of practiced composure, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of apprehension. "What do you mean? What did you see?" I felt a surge of frustration but kept my voice steady. "I saw messages between you and someone named Alex. The way you two talk, it seems like more than just friends." Her face went through a range of emotions: surprise, confusion, and then a carefully constructed innocence. "Alex? Oh, that must be a misunderstanding. He's just a colleague from work. We talk about work stuff." I could see the panic beneath her veneer of calm. It was almost too easy to provoke her. "Is that so?" Because it didn't look like just work messages to me. There were photos, Emma. Photos of you two together, smiling. Enjoying yourselves. It seemed pretty intimate. Her eyes widened, and she put down the spoon with a clatter. Tom, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. We've been working on a project together, and those messages are just friendly banter. The photos, they were from a work event. I took a step closer, forcing myself to stay composed. Friendly banter? The messages I read were filled with affection and longing. How do you explain that? Emma's face flushed slightly, and she took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. Tom, you're jumping to conclusions. Yes, Alex and I have been spending time together, but it's all been professional. I don't know why he would send messages like that. I could see the cracks in her story and the way her eyes darted nervously, but I had to play my cards carefully. It's hard to believe that, Emma. The way he spoke to you, the way you responded, it didn't feel like just professional. She looked genuinely distressed now, her hands wringing together. I swear, Tom, nothing is going on between us. You have to believe me. I don't want to lose you over this. I took a moment to absorb her plea. Her voice was tinged with desperation, and her attempts at justification were only making the situation more surreal. I knew I could press her further, but I chose to bide my time, savoring the discomfort and confusion I had instilled in her. Instead of pushing her further, I nodded slowly, as if considering her words. Okay, Emma, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt for now. But you need to understand that I'm not going to ignore this. I need to know the truth. Her shoulders sagged in what seemed like a mix of relief and frustration. Thank you for giving me a chance to explain. I'll do whatever it takes to prove that there's nothing to worry about. I managed a thin smile, concealing the satisfaction of having laid the groundwork for my next steps. We'll see, Emma, we'll see. As I turned to leave the kitchen, I felt a cold resolve settling over me. The confrontation had gone as I'd planned. Emma was now on edge, and I had succeeded in keeping her off balance. I knew that the real game was just beginning, and I was prepared to see it through to the end. The evening was dark and still, a stark contrast to the tumult of emotions swirling inside me. I sat alone in my study, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating the papers scattered across the desk. The room was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. The weight of what I had discovered, and the confrontation that followed, was pressing down on me, demanding action. My thoughts were a chaotic swirl, but amidst the turmoil, a singular, vengeful idea began to crystallize. The betrayal I felt was profound, and it demanded a response that was as symbolic as it was devastating. I had decided that the ultimate act of retribution would be to burn down the house, the home where Emma and Alex had conspired and shared their deceit. This house, which had once been a sanctuary, would become the stage for my act of vengeance. I began to meticulously craft my plan, driven by a cold, calculated determination. The first step was to determine the logistics. I needed to ensure that the fire would be both destructive and safe, in that no one would be harmed in the process. I spent hours researching and gathering information about fire behavior and safety protocols, making sure my plan would achieve maximum impact while minimizing risk to others. The house needed to be prepared for the fire to ensure it would spread quickly and thoroughly. I started by making a list of the materials I would need, accelerants such as gasoline and lighter fluid, along with various tools to create the necessary conditions for a fast-burning fire. I had to be careful with my purchases, ensuring that they were inconspicuous and did not draw attention. I also made detailed notes about the layout of the house. I studied the floor plan, noting where the flammable materials were stored and how the layout could be used to my advantage. I identified the most vulnerable points, areas where the fire would spread rapidly, such as the storage closets and the attic. The timing was crucial. I needed to ensure that Emma and Alex would be in the house during the fire, so I planned to execute the act on a day when they would be present and engaged in their usual activities. I began to track their schedules more closely, using subtle methods to gather information without raising suspicion. I observed their routines and noted the times when they were likely to be home alone, ensuring that the timing of the fire would maximize its impact. The actual execution of the plan required careful coordination. I decided that the best time to strike would be in the middle of the night, when the house would be empty of other occupants and the fire would have a chance to fully engulf the building before anyone had a chance to react. To ensure that I would not be immediately linked to the crime, I planned to be away from the area during the incident. I devised a method to start the fire remotely. Using a timer or remote ignition system, I would set the fire to start at a predetermined time. This would allow me to ensure that the blaze was well underway before anyone could potentially intervene. To avoid detection and ensure the success of my plan, I took additional measures to cover my tracks. I planned to create a false alibi, positioning myself in a place where I would be seen and where my whereabouts could be verified by others. I also made sure to destroy any evidence that could link me to the materials used for the fire, such as receipts and packaging. Finally, I needed to prepare myself emotionally for the aftermath. I knew that carrying out such a drastic act would not come without its toll. I reflected on the impact this would have on my sense of morality and sanity. I steeled myself for the possibility of guilt and regret, reminding myself that this was the price I was willing to pay for the retribution I sought. As I sat there, the plan took shape with a chilling clarity. I knew that the path I had chosen was irreversible, but the sense of control and the satisfaction of retribution drove me forward. The house would be more than just a pile of rubble, it would be a symbol of the destruction wrought by betrayal. I closed my notebook, a grim resolve setting in. The next steps were clear. I would execute the plan with precision, ensuring that Emma and Alex would experience the full force of the consequences of their actions. The evening was thick with anticipation as I embarked on the meticulous task of preparing for the arson. The weight of my plan rested heavily on my shoulders, demanding precision and careful planning. The house, once a symbol of comfort and security, was about to become the centerpiece of my retribution. I started by gathering the necessary supplies, making my way through the shadows to a hardware store I had identified as discreet and unremarkable. I navigated through the aisles, my eyes scanning the shelves for the items I needed. Each purchase was deliberate and unhurried: several gallons of gasoline, lighter fluid, and a high-quality timer switch. The gasoline was stashed away in large, opaque containers, its strong odor mingling with the musty scent of the store. I paid in cash, the cashier's casual indifference ensuring that my intentions remained hidden. Back at home, I set up my work area in the garage, far from the prying eyes of neighbors and family. The garage, with its dim light and concrete floor, provided the perfect backdrop for my preparations. I carefully poured the gasoline into several smaller containers, labeling each one with a permanent marker to indicate its contents. The sharp smell of gasoline filled the space, mingling with the cool night air. Next, I turned my attention to the timer switch. This device was crucial for ensuring that the fire would start at the precise moment I intended. I carefully read the instructions, setting the timer to activate the ignition system in the middle of the night, when the house was guaranteed to be empty. I tested the timer multiple times to confirm that it was functioning correctly and set it to a specific time that I knew would align with Emma and Alex's schedule. With the timer set, I began to plan the strategic placement of the accelerants. I reviewed the floor plan of the house, marking the most vulnerable points where the gasoline would have the greatest impact. I decided to distribute the accelerants in key areas: the attic, where old boxes and insulation could fuel the fire, the closets, filled with flammable materials, and the storage room, where the accumulated clutter would serve as kindling. I meticulously arranged the containers of gasoline in these locations, ensuring that they were well hidden but easily accessible. Each placement was calculated to ensure that the fire would spread rapidly, consuming the house before any chance of intervention. I used old rags and empty boxes to cover the containers, concealing their presence and minimizing the risk of accidental spillage. The timing of the fire was equally important. I had closely monitored Emma and Alex's schedules, noting their plans for the upcoming days. I chose a night when they were scheduled to be away from home, participating in an event that I knew would keep them occupied for several hours. This timing would allow the fire to start and intensify before anyone could return or raise the alarm. To further ensure that the fire would be uncontrollable and all-encompassing, I planned to use additional tools to facilitate ignition. I arranged a system where a match or lighter could be used in conjunction with the accelerants to ensure that the fire would start promptly and spread quickly. I practiced using these tools, making sure I could execute the plan efficiently and without error. As I completed the preparations, I took a moment to reflect on the gravity of my actions. The meticulous nature of my work, from the careful placement of accelerants to the precise timing of the ignition, underscored the seriousness of the retribution I was about to unleash. The house, now a ticking time bomb, was primed for the symbolic act of revenge I had envisioned. With everything in place, I felt a cold, calculated satisfaction. The stage was set, and the execution of my plan was imminent. I left the garage, casting one last look at the carefully arranged materials and the timer that would soon set the course for the house's fiery end. The anticipation of the impending destruction was almost palpable, and as I prepared for the final act, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The plan was nearing its final stages, and now it was time to execute the crucial step of staging my disappearance. The objective was to create a convincing scenario that would lead Emma and Alex to believe that I had vanished without a trace. This would heighten their anxiety and ensure that they were thoroughly unsettled, making the impact of the upcoming fire even more profound. I began by meticulously crafting the details of my disappearance. The first step was to ensure that my absence would be noticed but not immediately linked to any foul play. I carefully planned my movements over the next few days, making sure to leave behind a series of misleading clues that would lead Emma and Alex to believe that something ominous had occurred. I arranged for my car to be left in a secluded parking lot on the outskirts of town. This location was chosen for its relative isolation and low traffic, ensuring that my vehicle would not be immediately discovered. I placed a few personal items inside the car, my wallet, a jacket, and some paperwork, to make it appear as though I had left in a hurry but with no intention of returning. Next, I focused on creating a trail that would suggest I had gone missing under suspicious circumstances. I drafted a series of text messages and emails that I sent to Emma and a few close friends, each message implying that I was feeling distressed and contemplating leaving. The messages were carefully worded to suggest a personal crisis, adding a layer of credibility to the illusion of my disappearance. I used a public Wi-Fi network to send these messages, further distancing myself from any digital traces. To intensify the sense of urgency and fear, I staged a minor break-in at the house. I carefully opened a window and left it ajar, creating signs of forced entry. I scattered a few personal items around to make it appear as though a struggle had taken place. I also left a note in a place where it would be easily found, scrawling a few lines that hinted at a personal crisis and my state of mind. The note was ambiguous but unsettling, designed to provoke concern without revealing the true nature of my disappearance. As night fell, I took great care to ensure that my disappearance seemed genuine. I checked the house to make sure everything was in disarray, and the windows and doors were left in a state that suggested they had been tampered with. The scene was set to make it appear as though I had left under duress, heightening the sense of alarm for Emma and Alex. Before leaving, I reviewed my plan once more, ensuring that every detail was perfect. The disappearance had to be believable, creating a sense of dread that would amplify the effect of the fire. I wanted Emma and Alex to be thoroughly convinced that something terrible had happened to me, heightening their anxiety and fear. With everything in place, I slipped out of the house under the cover of darkness, making my way to a safe location where I would be out of sight. I watched from a distance, concealed by the night, as Emma and Alex arrived home and discovered the scene I had orchestrated. Their reactions were as anticipated: shock, confusion, and growing panic as they pieced together the clues and realized that something was wrong. From my vantage point, I could see the disarray and the growing anxiety on their faces. Emma's frantic calls to the police and Alex's attempts to piece together the events only added to the mounting tension. The carefully staged disappearance had achieved its purpose, creating a palpable sense of fear and uncertainty. As the night wore on, I remained hidden, observing the chaos I had set into motion. The disappearance was a crucial part of the plan, designed to ensure that the impact of the fire would be as profound as possible. The stage was set, and the final act of retribution was drawing closer. The house, now a ticking time bomb, awaited its moment of destruction, while Emma and Alex grappled with the terror of my vanishing act. The quietude of the days following my disappearance was punctuated by a carefully orchestrated psychological game that I had devised to manipulate Emma's thoughts and emotions. I intended to subtly nudge her into a state of heightened anxiety and reflection, making her question the gravity of her actions and the potential consequences. The aim was to ensure that, as she grappled with the aftermath, she would be compelled to confront the implications of her betrayal. I began by crafting anonymous messages and notes that I discreetly left for Emma to find. These were designed to be both unsettling and thought-provoking, hinting at the dire nature of the situation without providing any clear answers. Each note was penned in a vague, cryptic style, meant to provoke worry and self-doubt. For instance, one note read, "The weight of secrets is heavier than you know. Actions have a way of catching up with us." I chose locations for these notes that would be casually encountered, inside a book she was reading, tucked under a pillow on the couch, and even in the refrigerator, where she would find it while preparing a meal. These placements ensured that the notes would be discovered at various times, creating a pattern of unsettling surprises that would keep her on edge. In addition to the notes, I made subtle changes to my digital footprint, leaving behind traces that hinted at my whereabouts and actions. I manipulated social media accounts to create the illusion of recent activity, including vague status updates and check-ins at locations I had never visited. These were designed to add an element of confusion and unease, making Emma question whether I was truly missing or if there was a more sinister motive behind my disappearance. I also planted seeds of doubt through indirect communication. I sent anonymous emails to Emma, posing as concerned acquaintances or even as a fictitious entity, warning her about the potential consequences of her actions. One email read, "Sometimes the past comes back to haunt us in the most unexpected ways. Be careful with the choices you make." These messages were crafted to create a sense of paranoia and self-reflection. By avoiding confrontation, I ensured that Emma's paranoia would be self-induced, making her question her actions and decisions without realizing the true source of her unease. To further deepen the psychological manipulation, I arranged for a few acquaintances of mine to casually mention my disappearance in conversations with Emma. These acquaintances, unaware of the true nature of the situation, were instructed to express their concern and curiosity about my whereabouts. Their innocent inquiries and worried remarks added an extra layer of pressure, making Emma feel as though the situation was spiraling out of control. At the same time, I continued to monitor Emma's responses to the manipulation. I observed her reactions from a distance, noting her increasing agitation and anxiety. Her behavior, as she struggled to make sense of the cryptic messages and the growing sense of dread, was a testament to the effectiveness of my plan. As Emma's anxiety grew, she began to second-guess her decisions and reflect on the gravity of her actions. The cryptic notes and anonymous messages had successfully planted seeds of doubt and remorse. She became increasingly consumed by the fear of the unknown, constantly on edge and preoccupied with the possibility of unforeseen consequences. By the time the day of the fire approached, Emma was a bundle of nerves, her mind racing with anxiety and paranoia. The psychological manipulation had achieved its goal. She was now deeply unsettled and introspective, her every thought tinged with worry and regret. The final act of retribution was set to unfold, and Emma's psychological state was a testament to the effectiveness of the psychological game I had played. The night was cloaked in a deep, velvety darkness, the kind that seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. I knew that the time had come to execute the final part of my plan, the arson. The house was prepared, the accelerants were in place, and the timer was set. Every detail had been meticulously arranged to ensure that the fire would start precisely when I intended, without any hitches. I arrived at the house in the dead of night, the stillness around me a stark contrast to the turmoil within. I carried with me the final components of the plan, a remote ignition system and a set of tools to facilitate the process. My heart raced with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, knowing that this was the moment I had prepared for so long. I approached the house carefully, making sure to stay out of sight. The timer was set to trigger the ignition system at a specific hour, ensuring that the fire would start when Emma and Alex were expected to be away. I checked the placement of the gasoline containers one last time, ensuring they were perfectly positioned to maximize the fire's spread. With everything in place, I prepared to activate the remote ignition system. Using a small remote control, I initiated the ignition sequence. The system clicked into action, and I watched with grim satisfaction as the fire started to take hold. At first, there was just a faint flicker, but within moments, the flames began to grow, consuming the gasoline and spreading rapidly through the house. The crackling of the flames was the only sound that broke the silence of the night. The fire was swift and brutal, roaring to life with a ferocity that quickly overwhelmed the house. I took one last look at the Inferno before slipping away into the darkness, knowing that the destruction I had planned was now unfolding. The fire would burn with a cleansing intensity, leaving nothing but ashes and the remnants of what once was. The fire had been raging for some time when Emma and Alex returned home. The initial shock of finding the house in flames was palpable. They had been enjoying a night out, completely unaware of the chaos that awaited them. As they pulled into the driveway, the sight of the blazing house instantly filled them with a sense of horror and disbelief. Emma was the first to react. Her scream pierced the night as she saw the flames leaping from the windows. Alex's face went pale as he realized the severity of the situation. The fire was raging with a ferocity that illuminated the night sky, casting an eerie glow on their faces as they scrambled out of the car. Panic quickly set in as they attempted to make sense of the scene. Emma tried to call 911, her hands trembling uncontrollably as she fumbled with her phone. The connection was erratic, and her pleas for help were punctuated by the sound of sirens in the distance. Alex, meanwhile, raced around the house, trying to find a way in to rescue anything they could. The house, engulfed in flames, seemed almost to mock their desperate efforts. The intense heat made it impossible to get close, and thick smoke billowed out of the windows, choking any chance of immediate rescue. Emma's cries for help were met with the roar of the fire, drowning out any attempt at communication. Inside the house, the flames had taken on a life of their own. The rooms were filled with smoke, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burning wood and fabric. As the fire spread, the house became a treacherous maze of heat and smoke. Emma and Alex, despite their frantic attempts, were forced to retreat from the building as the flames grew more intense and the structural integrity of the house became increasingly compromised. As they stood outside, watching helplessly, the realization of their predicament began to sink in. Emma's face was streaked with tears, her mind racing through a whirlwind of thoughts. Alex, though attempting to stay calm, was visibly shaken. Their attempts to salvage anything from the house were futile. The fire was too intense and too far gone. The arrival of the fire department brought some relief, but by the time they managed to control the blaze, the house had been ravaged. The firefighters worked tirelessly, battling the inferno and preventing it from spreading to nearby properties. Emma and Alex, amid the chaos, were left to grapple with their fear, anger, and confusion. As the smoke began to clear and the fire was brought under control, the full extent of the damage became apparent. The house, once a home filled with memories, was now a charred skeleton of its former self. The emotional toll on Emma and Alex was evident as they stood amidst the ruins, their shock and dismay palpable. The fire had served its purpose, leaving behind a stark and devastating reminder of the retribution I had sought. Emma and Alex were left to confront the aftermath, their lives forever altered by the flames that had consumed their home. The sense of panic and fear that had enveloped them was a fitting prelude to the chaos and destruction that would follow. From the concealed vantage point in the shadows, I watched as the chaos of the fire unfolded. The night was alive with the sounds of sirens and the flickering glow of emergency lights. The flames that had consumed the house now cast long, ominous shadows across the yard, painting a stark contrast against the inky darkness of the surrounding streets. The first to arrive were the firefighters, their trucks racing through the neighborhood with blaring sirens and flashing lights. They pulled up to the scene with practiced efficiency, their faces set with determination and urgency. The firefighters quickly unloaded their equipment, hoses snaking across the lawn as they prepared to tackle the inferno. Their movements were swift and coordinated, a well-oiled machine in the face of disaster. I could hear the hiss of water as it met the roaring flames, a sound that mingled with the crackling of burning wood and the occasional groan of the house's structure succumbing to the fire. The firefighters worked with precision, aiming streams of water at the most intense parts of the blaze, their efforts creating plumes of steam as the water turned to vapor upon contact with the heat. As the firefighters took control of the situation, the arrival of police officers added another layer of activity. They began to cordon off the area, setting up barriers to keep onlookers and reporters at a safe distance. Their presence was a testament to the seriousness of the incident, their flashing lights cutting through the smoke and haze. I noticed Emma and Alex standing at a distance, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and disbelief. They were huddled together, their hands clasped tightly as they watched the scene unfold. The fire had reduced their home to a smoldering ruin, and their emotional response was palpable. Emma's face was streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. Alex, trying to remain composed, was visibly agitated, his eyes darting from the fire to Emma, his mind racing with unanswered questions. The police officers approached them, taking their statements and attempting to piece together what had happened. Emma's voice trembled as she recounted the events leading up to the fire. Her words punctuated by sobs and broken phrases. Alex's attempts to provide additional information were interspersed with frustrated sighs, his frustration evident as he struggled to make sense of the chaos. I could see the detectives and forensic experts arriving, their presence adding a layer of formality to the scene. They began to conduct preliminary investigations, photographing the remains of the house and taking notes. Their focused demeanor indicated that they were treating the incident with the utmost seriousness. And I knew that their findings would soon lead to an official investigation. From my hidden position, I observed Emma and Alex as they were taken aside for further questioning. The confusion and distress on their faces were evident, their once orderly lives now upended by the catastrophic event. The fire had not only destroyed their home but had also left them grappling with the emotional fallout of the night's events. As the hours passed, the fire was gradually brought under control, and the intensity of the flames diminished. The firefighters continued to work on the smoldering ruins, their efforts shifting from suppression to ensuring that no lingering hotspots could reignite. The police and forensic teams continued their investigation, piecing together the details of the incident. I remained in the shadows, absorbing every detail of the unfolding drama. The sight of Emma and Alex, their lives upended and their home reduced to ashes, was a grim reminder of the success of my plan. The fire had achieved its purpose, leaving behind a scene of devastation and a trail of unanswered questions. As the night wore on, I watched the scene slowly dissipate, the emergency responders wrapping up their work and preparing to leave. Emma and Alex, now enveloped in a blanket of cold night air, were left to confront the reality of their loss and the uncertainty of their future. Their anguish and despair were palpable, a testament to the impact of the retribution I had sought. With the scene fading into the distance, I finally slipped away into the night, leaving behind the aftermath of the fire and the profound consequences it had wrought. The darkness of the night enveloped me as I disappeared, the echoes of the night's events lingering as a haunting reminder of the destruction I had orchestrated. The early morning light began to creep through the curtains of my temporary hideaway, casting a pale, muted glow over the room. The remnants of the previous night's events weighed heavily on my mind as I lay in bed, unable to shake the sense of profound emptiness that had settled within me. The fire had burned fiercely, achieving the retribution I had meticulously planned, but now that the flames had died down, the reality of what I had done began to sink in. As I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts replayed the scenes from the night, the flickering flames, the frantic figures of Emma and Alex, and the destruction of their home. Despite the satisfaction I had anticipated, the reality was starkly different. The fire had consumed more than just wood and brick, it had also left behind a trail of emotional wreckage and moral disquiet. I found myself reflecting on the nature of revenge and its impact on my sense of self. The sense of vindication I had felt in the immediate aftermath of the fire now seemed hollow. The thrill of watching the flames had been fleeting, and as the adrenaline of the act faded, I was left with a stark, unsettling void. The satisfaction of revenge had not brought me the peace I had hoped for. Instead, it had unveiled a deeper emptiness within me. The destruction I had orchestrated was complete, but it was clear that the real damage was not merely physical. Emma and Alex were left to pick up the pieces of their lives, their once secure existence shattered. While their distress was a testament to the effectiveness of my plan, it also left me questioning the morality of my actions. I had succeeded in my quest for retribution, but at what cost? As I mulled over my actions, I realized that the satisfaction of revenge was a fleeting illusion. It had offered a temporary escape from the pain of betrayal but had ultimately left me grappling with the consequences of my decisions. The sense of justice I had sought was overshadowed by a profound sense of regret and disillusionment. It became evident that the path I had chosen had led me to a crossroads. The desire for revenge had driven me to destroy not only Emma and Alex's home but also my sense of peace and purpose. The weight of what I had done was heavy, and the emptiness that followed was a stark reminder of the futility of seeking satisfaction through destruction. In that moment of reflection, I made a decision. I resolved to leave the past behind and embark on a new path. The pursuit of vengeance had consumed too much of my life and soul, and it was time to seek a different kind of fulfillment. I understood that to rebuild my own life, I needed to let go of the anger and pain that had driven me to such extremes. I began to make plans for a new beginning. This involved not only physically relocating to a different place but also mentally and emotionally distancing myself from the turmoil of the past. I started to focus on rebuilding my life with purpose and intent, seeking out new opportunities and relationships that could offer genuine contentment. The process of starting anew was both daunting and liberating. It required me to confront my flaws and acknowledge the mistakes I had made. It also involved finding ways to atone for my actions, though I knew that true redemption was a complex and ongoing journey. The future was uncertain, but I was determined to forge a new path, one that was free from the shadows of vengeance. As I looked out the window, watching the dawn break over the horizon, I felt a glimmer of hope. The past was now behind me, and the future was a blank canvas, awaiting the strokes of a new chapter. The decision to move forward was not just about escaping the repercussions of my actions but about seeking a life that held meaning and purpose beyond the confines of retribution. In the end, I resolved to embrace this new beginning with a renewed sense of clarity and determination. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was a chance to redefine my life and build a future that was free from the chains of past grievances. As the first rays of sunlight touched the world outside, I took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead with a newfound sense of hope and resolve.